I am Alberto Grignolo, Corporate Vice President at Parexel, and today we are discussing one of the most exciting and promising areas of drug development, cell therapy. Specifically, we will be discussing the evolution of CAR T-cell therapy, also called chimeric antigen receptor T-cell therapy, or CAR-T for short. Doug Olson was among the first patients treated with CAR-T 9 years ago. Today, Doug is in remission, works as CEO of a medical diagnostics company, and has committed much of his time to helping other patients through the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society and other groups. Would you please share with us your experience and what it was like for you to undergo CAR-T therapy in those early days?
Thank you, Alberto. I'd be happy to. I was diagnosed with chronic lymphocytic leukemia in 1996. At that point in time, the only cure for CLL was a bone marrow transplant, which unfortunately had only a survival rate of 50%. So I didn't consider that to be a very viable treatment for my CLL. The recommendation was that we do watchful waiting, which is basically continue to monitor the cancer to see whether or not it was going to continue to be a problem. I was pretty lucky. I didn't need a lot of treatment for a number of years. But by the time 2010 came around, my CLL was about 50% of my bone marrow. And it had mutated to the point where it would not respond to normal chemotherapy. It was at this point that my physician, my oncologist, Dr. David Porter, sat me down and he said, "Doug, you'd be a good candidate for a new clinical trial." So I decided to join the clinical trial and became patient number 2 in the CAR-T clinical trial in 2010. The day the treatment started, it seems like it was just yesterday, I was sitting in an infusion chair. I was hooked up to an IV. My modified T cells were then hooked up to my IV. The infusion took maybe 5 minutes and absolutely nothing happened. This was repeated for the next 2 days. And again, really nothing happened at all. But then 2 weeks later, I woke up. I felt like I had the flu, only it was quite a bit worse. This persisted for a little over a week. I eventually had to be hospitalized because my kidneys were starting to get into trouble, but I was treated for that. Next day, I felt very good. And I think it was that day that my doc walked in, Dr. Porter walked into my hospital room, and he said, "Doug, 18% of your white cells are CAR-19 cells," which meant that the treatment was working, that my T cells were reproducing and killing cancer cells. And it was just the week after that I was sitting at Penn again with Dr. Porter. And he told me that they were not able to find a single cancer cell in my body, that my bone marrow was completely cancer-free. And that's when I knew I was going to be okay.
Wow, Doug, what a story. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I have to say, your perspective as a patient is very important, so important for the growth of this new therapy class, and the patient's access to it. What an experience. Could I ask you, how did you feel about participating in this clinical trial?
Well, when you're a cancer patient being told that you're basically out of options, when you're given an opportunity, even though you don't know what the outcome is going to be, to have a chance at surviving, you take it. And that's exactly how I felt, that this was a chance to fight back, that I didn't have to just wait and sit there and wait for the cancer to beat me. It was a chance to beat the cancer. After my treatment and my cure, one of the things that I decided was important was to be able to give back. So I became involved with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. I became involved in their advocacy program and also in what they call the First Connections program, where cancer patients that are newly diagnosed get to talk to former cancer patients to ask questions and basically start to come to grips with the fact that they have cancer and that they're going to be going through certain treatments, get to ask former cancer patients what it's like and provide that kind of support. The advocacy part of what I was involved in had to do initially with advocating for changes in the laws so that the new cancer treatments would be covered by insurance companies and by Medicare and Medicaid. Eventually, I was asked to be on a CMS panel considering whether or not Medicare was going to cover the very expensive CAR-T treatments that had just been approved. The good news is that CMS has agreed to cover CAR-T treatments, which is wonderful news for cancer patients. Also, to my knowledge, most major insurance companies now also cover the CAR-T treatments.
Have we made enough progress? What are you most hopeful about for yourself and for other patients?
Well, just imagine. In 1996, I was told I had a cancer that there was no cure for, that my outlook was pretty dismal. What's really changed, I think, in those intervening years is hope. It's one of the things that when I talk to cancer patients that I try to get them to understand is that, well, perhaps there may not be a treatment today for their cancer. There are so many clinical trials that are ongoing to look for different ways to attack cancer using the immune system, that if there isn't a cure today, if there isn't a treatment today, there may be one just around the corner. It's an incredibly exciting time.
Well, wonderful to hear that from you, Doug. And that brings us to the end of our conversation today, folks. Doug, I want to thank you for sharing your very personal story and your perspective. As I mentioned, we as an industry cannot do without the insights and involvement of patients. Thank you for your participation today.